The talking point of the first days of the new year. The weather, or rather the much criticised response of government, both local and national, to a cold spell of unusually long duration. Ms. Mary Nally, hello and welcome to the Frontline. What was your experience of the cold weather?
Well, we have a senior helpline that's manned by older people. We've been extremely busy over the last couple of weeks.
What sort of things have been hearing
People
on the
have
phone?
been ringing us. They're telling us how isolated they are, how lonely they are. We have people crying on the phone and telling us that they're trying to conserve their fuel. The Christmas bonus was a great way for that some older people use to buy extra fuel.
The man beside you, Gerard Kelly, what happened to you?
Well, this day a week ago I had a fall, very close to Dundrum Shopping Centre on the south side of Dublin.
On what, road, pavement?
Path, but a very busy path between a bus shelter along the Dundrum bypass and a housing estate. So a very, very busy path, absolutely no gritting whatsoever. Ground completely went from under me. Turned out I'd broken a rib. I was taken to hospital in an ambulance. The pain was the worst I've ever experienced in my life.
Broken rib.
And if I had been an old person, or if a pregnant woman had taken the same fall that I took, they would have been in serious trouble.
Did you get looked after in hospital?
You could say that, yeah. I wasn't very impressed. I had to wait 13 hours. I was told it wasn't a priority. Now, I was literally screaming.
We'll talk to the Minister in a moment. We also have Declan Power, who's a security analyst, former army officer himself. How do you rate the performance of government, both local government and national government, to the cold snap?
Well, I think the cold snap has probably brought a number of things into stark relief. It's shone harsh light onto our system and shown up a few holes in it. And like most systems around the world, it's a little bit like a piece of Swiss cheese. It's got quite a few glitches.
But how would you rate the performance?
I think the performance is mediocre, I think is fair to say. I wouldn't go
as good as that?
Yeah, exactly, as good as that. I wouldn't go out of my way to denigrate it, because it's very easy to get carried away on a tidal wave of hyperbole here. We're not used to this kind of weather. We don't normally get it. And when we do, it's a bit of a shock to our system, both individually and collectively. There are a number of things here that we can address, and I think primarily they sit on the two twin pillars of the issues of coordination and communication. That's how we need to, what we need to improve.
So
I mean,
they weren't there. They weren't there.
I don't think that they were there to the degree that they could have been. They were obviously there. The country didn't grind to a complete halt. But I think that there were a number of things could have been done better. For instance, there were a lot of calls about bringing the army out onto the streets. I think it's good that perhaps the government resisted the temptation to do something cosmetic with that. The army, if they're going to be used, this is not their primary role. It's to be used in conjunction with the local authorities. And I think the local authorities were scratching their heads a little bit about what they were going to do with additional services that they weren't normally used to working with.
Except this man is fit and well. And the only reason he's in A&E is because the pavement is not fit to walk on. That's the reason he's in A&E. It's nothing to do with being drunk. It's nothing to do with, you know, an accident, an act of God. It's something that could have been avoided. You look after the people in rural communities in the Gaeltacht and so on, people who are isolated. I mean, you've got to feel ashamed of yourself, really, because those people were not and are not being looked after at the moment.
Well, I wouldn't agree with you. And one of the things that I did last week as Minister of Community, and I have responsibilities for communities all around the country, is to contact, for example, Muintir na Tíre, Vincent de Paul, Protestant Aid, and all of the leader partnership companies we have, because they have a lot of contact with people. And one of the worries we had is that where the public health nurse is visiting every week, that was going to continue. But we had a lot of elderly people who are maybe in the best of health, but because of the weather conditions, couldn't even get down.
How were the public health nurses getting to places that could not be got to?
Well,
I mean, there were people who weren't being visited.
No, sorry, funny enough, that wasn't the biggest issue. In my experience in rural Ireland, the biggest issue was people not, for example, you often get a situation with a rural house where you might be 50 yards away from the main road. And how, if you're 70 or 80 years of age, would you be able to get down there?
But you may have seen it in this morning's Irish Times, a German saying, 10 centimetres of snow, give me a break. Give me a metre of snow, now you might have a problem. A Polish girl says, you're closing schools for 3 centimetres of snow or 10 centimetres of snow. talk to me about -30. Now we close a school. I mean, this was ludicrous. The capital city ground to halt initially on 3 centimetres of snow. I mean, what kind of nonsense is that? The answer is everybody was on holiday.
No, that's not the fact. Actually, what happened, because I was in the city that evening, on the Wednesday evening, and first of all, in Poland, unfortunately for the people in Poland, 50 people died in the cold this winter. So I don't think we should quote Poland as an example. But the reality here, what happened, I saw it, I was in the office on Wednesday afternoon, we got a snow shower early in the afternoon, and it immediately froze over. And the difficulty that arose is you couldn't get the gritting machines out because the place became totally gridlocked with traffic, and you couldn't grit roads that were gridlocked with traffic.
I feel that the government, both local and national, completely let us down on this. Like 3 centimetres snow, 10 centimetres of snow. We've had nothing but excuses from the government since then. My daughter is in exam year this year, and junior third year, and every day from Christmas to the time of the exam is exceptionally important to them. They're they're trained to get to this point after Christmas, then straight into revision. And yet we could not get our children to school because the roads were not treated. But not only that, then the minister comes out and says schools can close. Now, it's great fun for the children to be able to go out and play with snowmen and stuff like that.
Michael Conway, you're from the Emergency Planning Society.
We need the communications which says, don't send your staff home and do what you think is the right thing. As an employer, in fact, ask your staff to stay back, wait a couple of hours, and that is the coordination, and that is the part, the communications part, that is missing. We have great emergency and coordination
plans. But are you saying
plans.
that the knowledge was there? They could have said, listen, this is going to be chaotic for a couple of hours. Stay put, stay at your desks, traffic will clear, the snow will clear, and you'll get home.
Stay at your desk, we'll grit the roads, then you can go home. And we'll actually grit the ramps as well, because that seems to be the problem on the motorways. You don't grit the ramps, I don't understand it.
Did you feel there was anyone in charge?
No.
I myself was in contact a couple of times on Wednesday with the Taoiseach. In relation to the issue you've raised there, who was in charge? The issue of gritting the roads and providing salt, putting salt in roads here in the city, is an issue for Dublin City Council. So what you need is a local response to local conditions. Now, luckily, people got home eventually. There was huge delays. I was one of...
People got home eventually. I mean, it took them 4 or 5 hours to go a distance of 10 miles.
Yes,
I mean,
and there was a major problem.
In a capital city. It is daft.
Pat, perhaps just there are two things there. I'm sure, Minister, you'd agree. This has shown up a lot of problems and holes in the contingency planning, both at local authority level and maybe at the upper echelons, and that needs to be taken out and looked at now and dusted off. The local authorities, under the guidance of the Department of the Environment, Department of Transport, need to revisit this. But I think also,
but hang on a second.
You're
both talking there as if this is the so-called 1 in 50-year event or whatever.
No.
However, we've had to a lesser degree, we've had this kind of condition. Michael, last year.
February 2009.
February 2009.
Same thing. Another unique, unprecedented event. There was nobody in charge. There was nobody doing things. There was no communications.
I heard the civil servant who was the coordinator under Minister Gormley saying, you know, that things are not as bad as people are saying they are. Just continue as you have been managing for the last week or 10 days or whatever. And this is to people who are listening to the radio and knowing that they're down to their last day's food.
We mobilised 2,600 people to the Rural Social Scheme to deal with that issue.
All right. I just want to get... Yeah, you wanted to say something again, Mary, very quickly.
We have older people who have not left their homes since before Christmas. We need to get to those people.
Yeah.
Some people haven't seen anybody for a day, couple of days, many days. They're ringing us, they're calling us on the helpline, they're crying on the phone.
Since the 20th of December, we've basically had ice and snow non-stop. Our roads is covered with, I don't know, about 2 inches, 3 inches of ice, and then there's snow on top of that. We kind of must be obviously forgotten about, because it's all about last Wednesday. They seem to have forgotten that we actually are practically trapped in our homes since the 20th of December. Now, there's no doubt the council staff, the frontline staff, was out there gritting the roads. They didn't get to our road until last Wednesday.
So I live way out the country, and I live in a very hilly part of the country.
We as a neighbourhood and as a farming community, we were out, we got salt in our local Connacht Gold store until they ran out of it. They nearly even ran out of feed for cattle. Our local council set up numbers, emergency numbers and whatever else. But when you rang them, all you got was like a voicemail that was full.
Gina Quinn, now you just give us some idea of the cost of all of this.
Well,
You're with Dublin Chamber.
Yes, and the economic cost has been absolutely huge. We estimate it's about 40 million for the Dublin region alone, lost productivity when workers are not able to get into work. There's been a huge impact on the retail sector. Businesses have not been able to get out and service their customers. And that is replicated all over the country in rural and urban areas.
Some of that money will obviously be spent in time, but a lot of it will never be spent.
An awful lot of it will not be spent, and in a particularly difficult economic time, it is very, very hard.
The planning just needs people to know what they have to do and when they have to do it, and then do it.
And you'd go along with that, wouldn't you?
I would, and I would add to that, Pat. It's no good planning. Certainly one thing that you learn in the army is that plans tend to go out the window in a crisis, so you've got to implement them so that the people who have to implement them in a crisis will be familiar and aware with how to adjust them when they need to.
Yeah, absolutely. And there has been a huge amount of effort put into emergency planning over the last number of years. Now, one of the challenges, of course, you face is that every crisis is totally unique and is totally different.
Are you ready for the next crisis, which we know is melting snow on the mountains of Munster, which is going to lead to floods in Munster? Are you ready?
That's going to be a big challenge because there's... Sorry. No, you can't. The idea that we can control nature completely is unrealistic. And what we have to try to do is to deal with events as they unfold as best as we can.
No, but we think that there was leadership on the ground and in Merrion Street for this crisis, to get us through this crisis. Do you really believe it?
What I'm saying is you can always do it better. There is nothing in life, and nothing I've ever done in my life, that I couldn't look back and say I could do it better. What I'm saying is, as it unfolded, we did roll out the emergency plan, the emergency planning committee. Having sat there, it is fair to say that all of the different agencies did fully cooperate.